Hi, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Cynthia, and today I just want to talk about some of my favorite reads of 2023. I do just want to preface that some of these books are part of series, so some of my favorite books were part of series and not necessarily the first book in the series, others were standalone, but most of these books do fall in the fantasy romance genre, so just a little preface before I get started. But with that being said, let's jump right in. If I glance over here a lot, it's because I'm looking at my notes. The first book on the list is One of Us is Dead by Geneva Rose. In this book, we follow four women, Shannon, Crystal, Olivia, and Jenny, who live in the small town of Buckhead. Buckhead is a small town filled with opulence, gossip, and wealth. Shannon is dealing with the fallout of her husband Bryce leaving her for a much younger woman. Crystal is from Texas and has no idea what she is in for. And Olivia has finally stepped in and taken Shannon's crown, but sometimes not everything is what it seems. And Jenny, who has finally grown her business enough that she knows not just all the women of Buckhead, but all of their secrets too. This book gave me major Desperate Housewives vibes, like Desperate Housewives, Pretty Little Liars, Big Little Lies, Gossip Girl set in a small town kind of feel. And it was honestly so fun. I also really enjoyed all of the female characters. They felt very just fleshed out and developed, and I really liked that in the beginning they're very just like power hungry and ambitious, and then by the end they're like, fuck these men and fuck you too, but they have each other's backs. It was very much like kind of like a sisterhood coming together for the greater good moment, I guess you could say. I read this book at the beginning of 2023, so it's there, but it's in the back. But yeah, this book was just very good. I really enjoyed it. I didn't see the twist coming, but as you will come to find, I usually don't see the twist coming. It is one of my biggest character flaws. But yeah, this was just a really good book, and I loved how characters who seemed kind of cliche and that they wouldn't be as important to the story ended up being pivotal in the story. And it was just a really fun read. If you have been on my blog, you'll know that I was not a fan of The Perfect Marriage, also written by Geneva Rose. However, One of Us is Dead completely made up for how much I hated The Perfect Marriage. So do I recommend The Perfect Marriage? No. Do I recommend One of Us is Dead? Yes. The next book on the list will not really come as a surprise, if I'm being honest. And I feel like at this point it's a little bit controversial with either you love it or you hate it, and there's not really an in-between. And that is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. And I am on the side of it had the vibe, and I liked the vibe. Obviously there's a lot wrong with it, but that's not the point. So in case you don't know about Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, I'm going to explain it badly in the sense that our chronically ill girly Violet loves books, wants a quiet life, and she's studied her whole life to become a scribe, and then one day her mom is like, nah, fuck you, you're gonna go into the writer's quadrant. And so she has to basically fight for her life to survive. She falls in love with a shadow daddy Xaden, and oh yeah, she has to bond a dragon. And yeah, it's an adventure, it's a ride, it's quite spicy. And I had a lot of fun with it. I was not a fan of Iron Flame, the second book in the Empyrean series, but that's neither here nor there. I would really like to stop saying vibe. So yeah, Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Let's move on. The next book on the list is Six Scorched Roses by Carissa Broadbent. Six Scorched Roses is a novella within the Crowns of Nyaxia series. So the first book is The Serpent on the Wings of Night. Then you have, I guess 1.5 would be Six Scorched Roses, and then the second book in Rain and Araya's duology within the Crowns of Nyaxia series is The Ashes on the Star-Cursed King. It's a lot. But essentially in our little novella, we meet Lilith, who is a STEM queen. She is living in a town that has been cursed by a god, and there is only one rose bush. That is the only thing in the town that is not dead, dying, or decaying. It's very lovely. So she makes a deal with the vampire Vale. She'll give him 6 roses from the only living bush in her town, and in exchange, he will give her 6 vials of his blood so she can try to find a cure for her town. And I will also say, you can read this book as a standalone, but I wouldn't, primarily because it's set in the world of Crowns of Nyaxia, but Lilith and Vale are very much their own characters in their own story. However, there are little references here and there to The Serpent on the Wings of Night that will probably just go over your head if you haven't read it, but The Serpent on the Wings of Night is worth a read. It wasn't my favorite, but I did enjoy it. But anyway, I just love this book because I love Lilith. She is our STEM queen. She's so smart and she's so unrelenting, and she's just so determined, and I love it. She's ambition personified. And then we have Vale, who's a cinnamon roll, touch her you die, morally gray kind of character. They work so well. I love that Vale enables Lilith to be her smart, nerdy self, and in exchange, Lilith really like tests Vale. And it reminds me of this meme I saw with Luke and Lorelai, and it's like, Lorelai is annoying, but Luke loves it. You know what I mean? Is annoying, loves to be annoyed. But yeah, it's a really good book. You can read it on its own. I would read the whole series just so, you know, those little things make sense. And the next book on the list is no surprise. It is The Ashes and the Star-Cursed Cane by Carissa Broadbent. The Ashes and the Star-Cursed Cane is the second book in the Crowns of Nyaxia series, and in this book, Araya is dealing with the fallout of the events of the Kajari. Sorry if I mispronounced that. I don't know how to say words. She is facing a betrayal from Rain, a deep loss, and now more than ever, questioning her past. Araya sets out on a quest to not only reclaim what is hers, but also finally get answers to her past. This book wraps up Rain and Araya's story, but does not end the Crown of Nyaxia series. So like I mentioned, The Ashes and the Star-Cursed Cane is the second book in the Crowns of Nyaxia series, and Carissa Broadbent had said that the Crowns of Nyaxia series will be 6 books, every 2 books, so 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, will focus on a different pairing with little novellas in between. And like I mentioned before, I liked The Serpent and the Wings of Night, but I really like The Ashes and the Star-Cursed Cane better because it just worked as a sequel. I think the problem with The Serpent and the Wings of Night was that there was a lot of info dumping, and there was a lot of world building, and there was a lot of... Rain and Araya are in the Kajari, which is a tournament. Think like kind of like Hunger Games kind of vibe. There's a lot going on, but we don't really get answers to anything in the first book. The first book sets up a lot of questions, and the second book answers a lot of those questions, and that's why I liked it so much more. I mentioned it in my Romantasy Rex video, but I don't like redheads, and I'm not a fan of vampires, but Rain could get it. That's all I'm gonna say. The next book on the list is Belladonna by Adeline Grace. Belladonna is the first book in the Belladonna series, a series that I've actually really come to enjoy, and I will say Foxglove is an honorable mention. And in Belladonna, we follow our main character Signa, who has been raised by a string of guardians, each meeting an untimely end while Signa was in their care. Her remaining relatives are the elusive Hawthorns who live at Thorngrove, an estate as equally glittering as gloomy. Signa's uncle mourns his late wife through wild parties, while his son grapples for control of the family's declining reputation and a daughter who suffers from a mysterious illness. Before Signa can fully settle into life at Thorngrove, Signa realizes there is a more sinister plot unfolding right before her eyes. To uncover what is happening, Signa must partner with Death himself, a fascinating and dangerous shadow who has never been far from her side. Though he has made her life a living hell, Death shows Signa that their connection may be more powerful than either of them have imagined. I do also just want to preface this by saying that I have seen the commentary, heard the commentary that a lot of people don't like this book because it felt as if Death was grooming Signa. And while I understand, I disagree. And I just want to get that out of the way. I don't know why. I just felt the need to throw that out there. But I mean, a girl who cannot die and death personified honestly just intrigued me so much as a concept that there was no way I was not going to read this book. The atmosphere is very gothic and kind of foggy. Think Haunting of Hill House. It's just so fun to read. The story itself was also very interesting. The mystery surrounding the Hawthorns kept me fully interested. And even the ending, just from beginning to end, I was just so fascinated. And that's something that I really love about Adeline Grace's writing, is that even in Foxglove, she just picks up right away with like the tension and the drama and the intrigue. And so from the very first sentence, you just want to keep reading. And then the book ends and you're like, oh my God, I have to read the next book. And Foxglove does get an honorable mention because I did like it. But I don't have a copy of Belladonna yet, but I did snag a copy of Foxglove. It's the Barnes & Noble's exclusive edition, so I gotta take the sticker off, but let me just show you. Let me just fangirl for a minute. Like, Like I can't, it's just so pretty. It's such a pretty book. I do need to get a copy of Belladonna because I really enjoyed it. It made it on the list of my 2023 favorite reads, so I think I enjoyed it. Yeah, I managed to snag myself a copy of Foxglove, which, honorable mention, this one was also very good. I feel like sometimes I read quite a few sequels this year that kind of fell flat in my opinion, but this one does not. And Wisteria comes out in August of 2024, and yeah, I cannot wait. I have loved this series so far, and Belladonna was a great introduction, Foxglove was a great follow-up, and I have no doubt that Wisteria will be a great ending. The next book on the list is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross, and Divine Rivals is the first book in the Letters of Enchantment series, which follows two young journalists, Iris Winnow and Roman Kitt. Iris and Roman are rivaling journalists fighting to get the promotion at the paper they work at, the Oath Gazette, while a war between the gods brews around them. Iris wants nothing more than to keep her family together. Her mother suffers from addiction, and her brother is missing in action on the front lines. So to Iris, her best bet is to win the promotion at the Oath Gazette. To combat her anxiety, Iris writes letters to her brother and slips them under her wardrobe door, where they vanish into the hands of Roman Kitt, her cold rival from the paper. When he anonymously writes back, the two of them forge a connection that will follow both of them all the way to the front lines. I just need a minute, because every time I think about Divine Rivals, I think about that cliffhanger and how much it hurt, and I just need a second. The second book in the Letters of Enchantment series, Ruthless Vows, is actually out. It came out a few days ago, but I missed the notification that Libby got in copies, so I have to wait 2 weeks. But that's fine. Anyways, what I really loved about this book was the world building and the imagery. Reading this book felt like watching a movie. The whole time I was reading this book, I could just see everything happening in my head in such vivid detail. It was fascinating. I feel like that doesn't happen with a lot of books. There are some things, for instance, what's a good example? Like in the ACOTAR series, Sarah J. Maas sometimes writes action scenes a little confusingly, and it's hard to picture what's going on because there is so much going on. But in this book, it wasn't like that. The whole book was just so easy to imagine in my head, and I really, really liked that. I also really love Iris and Roman. Roman is definitely up there with the book boyfriends. Not gonna lie, he's a little too young for me, but I really like him and Iris. Yeah, I'm still not over that ending. I will give Ruthless Vows an honorable mention just because I don't see how I could not like it. I really loved One Dark Window, and Two Twisted Crowns kind of fell short for me, so I'm not holding my breath, but I will still give Ruthless Vows an honorable mention. The next book on the list is A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. A Court of Mist and Fury is the second book in the A Court of Thorns and Roses series, and in this book, I'm pretty sure it's Feyre, but I say Fair in my head. So we'll just say Feyre because that's the technically correct pronunciation. So Feyre has undergone more trials than one should ever have to go through. Even though she has been granted powers and the lifespan of a high fae, she is still haunted by her time under the mountain. As her marriage to Tamlin approaches, Feyre begins to have her doubts. She finds herself split between two worlds. One with Rhysand, the High Lord of the Night Court, who has called in his bargain, and the second with Tamlin, the High Lord of the Spring Court. Feyre must navigate not just her new life, but also politics, passion, and power, all while a dark evil looms. To be honest, A Court of Mist and Fury is such a breath of fresh air. My favorite thing to say about this series is that A Court of Thorns and Roses walked, so A Court of Mist and Fury could sprint, not run. Sprint. Yeah, I had a hard time coming back to reality once I was done with A Court of Mist and Fury. Let me put that out. This story just had me in a chokehold. Fourth Wayne and A Court of Mist and Fury, I don't know, man. They're like, those books are laced. They're laced with something, and you can't change my mind. But this book also really had me in my feels. There's a scene early on with Tamlin in the Spring Court that literally had me crying, and I was just like, what is wrong with me? Don't really cry. I'm not really a crier, but I was bawling. I really felt for Feyre. Just from the rough early scenes with Tamlin to the later, sweeter scenes with Rhysand, that's very biased. But just beginning to end, I really love this book. I really enjoyed it. It's similar to Fourth Wing, it was a vibe, passed the vibe check, and yeah, it just had me in a chokehold, and coming back to reality was not fun or easy. I have read the whole ACOTAR series, and A Court of Mist and Fury is definitely my favorite across the whole series. As much as I love that it went uphill after A Court of Thorns and Roses, I do think the series kind of went back down after A Court of Mist and Fury, which is unfortunate because Sarah J. Maas did my boy Cassian so dirty, but I digress. Let's move on. The next book on the list is One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. One Dark Window is the first series in the Shepherd King duology, and in One Dark Window we follow our main character Elsbeth, who lives in Blunder, a mist-locked kingdom. The mist is a plague on anyone who is unfortunate enough to be affected by it. Those with the infection are cast out to the mist. Elsbeth must partner with the darkness living in her mind, known as the Nightmare. Alongside a group of highwaymen, they all work together to gather the 12 Providence cards in order to unite the deck and cure the infection. That was kind of a bad summary. The book is a lot better than my summary of it. But what I loved about this book, I really love Elsbeth and Raven. I actually think about Raven a lot. Raven is up there with like Xaden and Rhysand, and I'm just gonna include Asriel because let's be honest, we all know his book is coming. I'm just living for the Asriel book. I really like Elsbeth and Raven. They are interesting on their own, but they're even more interesting together. And I also really like the Nightmare. The Nightmare lives in Elspeth's head, and it's a very interesting concept. And I think Rachel Gillig just executes the Nightmare so well. Just so well. It was such a fun read. It's very clever. I was so fascinated by the Providence cards and how uniting them would cure the plague, which that comes later in Two Twisted Crowns. And I will say Two Twisted Crowns was kind of a letdown, if I'm being honest. I loved One Dark Window so much that I had really high hopes for Two Twisted Crowns, but it wasn't for me. I don't want to get too much into it, but I will leave it as an honorable mention just because it does complete the duology, and it's the second book in the Shepherd King duology. But One Dark Window was a very fun read. I found myself very interested in it, and I think I read it in less than 12 hours. I was in. But yeah, One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. The next book on the list is The Everkeen by L.J. Andrews. The Everkeen is the first in the Everseas series. In this book, we focus on our main character, Livia, who is kidnapped by the pirate king, Eric. So just a little preface. Livia is of the Earth Fae. Eric is of the Sea Fae. When Eric was a child, the Earth Kingdom stole his crown, and so years later, when the chasm opens and Eric is able to slip through, he does. However, neither Livia or Eric are prepared for what comes next, as Livia heals not only Eric's land, but also his heart, and Eric finds himself torn between revenge on his enemy and restoring his kingdom back to its former glory. Also another little preface. The Everseas is a spin-off of another book series by L.J. Andrews, which I cannot remember. Eric is, I believe, a child in those series, and I haven't read that series. Hold on, I'm gonna look up what it is. So I don't even know where to start with this one. L.J. Andrews has the Broken Kingdom series, and I believe in that series, Eric is a child. I haven't read that series, so I cannot say for certain. However, I don't think you need to read that series first before you read The Everkeen. I didn't, and The Everkeen made complete sense to me. I really enjoyed The Everkeen. The Everkeen is marketed as a dark romance fantasy, and I was kind of curious to see what it was about, mainly the dark aspect, because dark really is per author. There's not a clear definition that everyone follows. Every author has their own definition of dark, and you just kind of got to figure out if you're on the same page as that author with the definition of dark. But anyways, like I said, this book was my first dark romance fantasy, and I was a little nervous about it. It just got better and better. The opening was a little rough. It definitely kind of leaned into that dark element of the book, but after that, it was, no pun intended, smooth sailing. And I'm not really into pirates. Like I said, I'm not really into vampires, but I can be converted. Not really into pirates, but I really did love this one. And that cliffhanger at the end, the second book in the Everseas series, The Everqueen, comes out, I believe, at the end of January 2024. So that probably will be in my February 2024 reading recap, and I can't wait. I have it marked on my calendar. I cannot wait. I cannot wait. Like, I am so ready. And this series is also a Kindle Unlimited series, so if you have a subscription, if not, consider getting one. The last fantasy romance book on this list is The Shadows Between Us by Trisha Levenseller. The Shadows Between Us was originally marketed as a standalone. However, it is not. It is the Shadows Between Us series, book 1. In this book, we follow our main character, Alessandra, who is the most scrappy, sarcastic, and fascinating character I have met in a really long time. She's what I wanted Fyra to be, if I'm being honest. She has 3 simple goals. 1, woo the Shadow King. 2, marry the Shadow King. And 3, kill the Shadow King and take his kingdom for herself. Fortunately for Alessandra, she is not the only one trying to kill the king, so in order to keep his council off his back and protect his legacy, the Shadow King and Alessandra form an unlikely alliance. Oh boy, let me tell you why I loved this book. I wasn't even sure that I would like this book I kind of went into it blind and just read it. It is fairly YA. It's marketed as a standalone, like I said, but it's not. We're getting a second book about Alessandra's sister, Chrysantha, and I am excited, but I'm also wary because I didn't really like Nesta, but I mean, by the end of A Court of Silver Flames, I was kind of like, all right, Nesta's all right. So we'll see about Chrysantha. This book truly took me by surprise. Alessandra is definitely one of my favorite female main characters. She's so sarcastic and unapologetic and ambitious, and I love it. I love that she wants the throne and not the cane. And our Shadow King, Callias, is quite the cinnamon roll. He has a rule where you cannot stand within 5 feet of him, but not Alessandra. And I love that even though they're kind of like, we're just doing this for face value, they're actually falling in love with each other. And I didn't really like the ending. I felt like it was a little bit of a cop-out. I didn't really like the reveal. Not a lot of things in this book make sense. We got our Shadow Daddy, and he was a great Shadow Daddy. I also love Alessandra as a main character, and honestly, I don't know. I just really enjoyed this book. I don't know if it was because I liked Alessandra so much or I liked the dynamic with Callias and Alessandra. I don't know what it was, and I know a lot of people didn't really like this book. I don't know. I love this book. It's kind of like Fourth Wayne. It was a vibe. I liked the vibe. That's all I got. Alrighty, the last book on the list, and kind of a full circle moment because we're kind of back into the domestic thriller, and that book is On a Quiet Street by Serafina Nova Glass. So this book is criminally underrated in my opinion. I never see it on social media. I think I've seen it twice on Instagram, and it's quite a shame because I really loved this book. It's very, let me just tell you about it. The neighborhood of Brighton Hills seems like nothing more than the perfect picture of opulence and white picket fences. However, Brighton Hills is also the perfect place to hide. Cora thinks her husband Finn is cheating. She just needs to catch him. Paige has recently lost her son to a hit and run and is not someone to be crossed in the neighborhood, which is why Paige is the perfect person to help Cora figure out if Finn really is cheating. And then there is Georgina, the young reclusive mother. But why would a young mother act stranger and stranger by the day? Something might be off in Brighton Hills. I love this book for the same reason why I loved One of Us is Dead. There was a big, I don't know what's going on with my hand. I don't know what's going on. But there's a big sense of sisterhood in this book. I really love, even though Cora, Paige, and Georgia are going through their own things, they really do come together and they're really just girls supporting girls. And I love it. I'm here for it. There are some very dark themes. Georgina's story is very, very dark. You know, a lot of abuse and things like that. So definitely trigger warning on that aspect. But like I said, this book is so criminally underrated. I would really love more people to read it. It was such a fun read to me. The mystery element, it kind of reminds me of how Big Little Lies, how you start off with like this group of people, and then as the story unfolds, they each, I think it's called the red string effect, red string theory, but each character is connected to another one, and there's just all these little strings, and by the end of the story, all of these little strings have just made up this big mosaic, and it's just beautiful, and I love it, and it's so clever, and I love when authors do that. And Serafina Nova Glass does it really, really well, and On a Quiet Street was probably one of my favorite domestic thrillers that I read in 2023. I didn't read that many. I probably read about maybe like 6. It was definitely up there. It was definitely one of my favorites. If I had to rate it, I would rate it higher than One of Us is Dead. But yeah, it was just a really good read. It was a really good book. Like I said, more people should read it because it's a really good book and I like it and I recommend it. And that is it. Those were some of my favorite reads of 2023. 2023 was a big fantasy romance year for me. It was a big series year for me. A lot of what I read were books that were part of series, which is kind of interesting. I feel like previous years I read a lot of standalones, but I read a lot of things that I enjoyed this year. I want to continue reading things that I'm enjoying, and I'm just very excited for all the reading I'm gonna do in 2024. And like the intro, I'm gonna keep the outro short. So as always, thank you so much for watching. I cannot wait to see you in the next one. And I also hope you're reading things that you are enjoying. And if you've read any of the books on this list, I would love to know your opinion. Even if you don't agree with me, tell me why you hated that book. Just let it rip, you know? But I will see you in the next one. Thank you as always for watching. Bye.